Hey now, and welcome to Random Movie Club. I'm your host, Rob Logan, and each episode I sit down with a co-host to discuss any movie of their choosing. The only qualification is that the movie is available to watch at home on DVD, Blu-ray, or digital. Before you listen to this show, I highly recommend that you watch the movie we're going to talk about, because we're going to spoil everything. Also, at the end of the episode, I'll tell you which movie we're going to discuss next, so you have enough time to watch it. If you enjoy Random Movie Club, you can help keep it going by supporting us on Patreon. Supporters get special benefits like bonus episodes, patron-only movie events, giveaways, and more. Show your support for Random Movie Club and the Geek Generation by visiting our Patreon campaign at thegeekgeneration.com/support. On this episode, I'll be discussing Max Payne with CaptHowdy. Let's roll the film. Max Payne was released in 2008 from director John Moore. Written by Bo Thorne and based on the game franchise written by Sam Lake, the film stars Mark Wahlberg, Mila Kunis, and Beau Bridges. So you chose Max Payne as your movie.
Mm-hmm.
And as I asked all my guests, why did you choose Max Payne?
A couple of reasons. First one being Max Payne was probably the first video game that solicited like an emotional response out of me. I found the story just super intense. The characters were so well developed, and just sort of the journey that Max takes throughout the whole thing. It was an absolutely incredible experience, and being able to take that and put it into movie form, which is generally a medium that I connect with more on levels like that.
Same, absolutely.
The movie just ended up meaning a lot to me. On the other hand, I feel like the movie just gets a lot of flack that it doesn't really deserve, and
I 100% agree with that.
Any opportunity that I have to scream about that at people, mm-hmm. I'm happy to do. So that's why.
I'm glad you chose this, because I feel the same way about this movie. It doesn't get a lot of critical acclaim. I feel like, one, it's a beautiful movie.
Yes. I
also feel that it is potentially the best video game movie.
100% agree with you. Absolutely.
There's a lot out there. There's a lot that people have said were good, and then in hindsight, they look back at it and they're like, I think Max Payne is the reverse. I think that a lot of people came out of it being like, well, it wasn't enough like the game for me. But then in hindsight, you're like, you know what? It actually held true to like the tone
mm-hmm.
of the game. And at the same time, in hindsight, is just a very good movie.
Oh my God, yeah. And there's not even that many differences between the movie and the game.
No.
I feel like the movie obviously can't have as much length as the game, so you miss some things, but overall the spirit, the main plot line, there were very few embellishments as far as what you saw on the screen versus what you saw in the game. I mean, I thought there couldn't have been a more perfect rendition, in my opinion.
Yeah. Before we talk about the movie itself, as always, I go to IMDb and gather up a whole bunch of trivia about the movie. And we have quite a few things to talk about here, one of which relates directly to the game, that James McCaffrey, the voice of Max Payne in the video game franchise, makes a cameo as the FBI agent that Lieutenant Jim Bravura introduces to the real police officer. He also shows up near the end of the film asking if Bravura is all right before calling in Division 1 over the radio.
Oh, wow. I actually didn't know that.
I didn't know it until I looked it up either, and I think that's super cool.
Yeah.
I love when they incorporate people from the source material in that way. It's like getting Luke Ferrigno in the Incredible Hulk movie real quick, just to do it. Because it's fun.
It's a nice touch for sure.
Yeah. Despite the game being based around slow motion, or bullet time as they called it, the shootouts, there's really only 3 slow motion shooting sequences in the whole movie. Mm-hmm. And I think they're used to good effect. I think they could have overdone it.
Oh yeah, for sure. You know, especially since, and I'm not sure what the relation to this movie and The Matrix is as far as like when they came out, but I know that every time you bring up Max Payne, I shouldn't say every time, but a lot of the times, that's one of the things that people like to complain about is the bullet time. And they ripped off The Matrix, and it's maybe 30 seconds of the whole movie, and they only do it a couple of times. And when they do, it's fucking dope. Like, it works.
And if you ever play the game, that's the main mechanic of the game. So if they didn't do it in the movie, it would have felt like it was missing something.
Mm-hmm.
But they definitely didn't Zack Snyder it either and make every action sequence slow motion, which was smart. Could have been overdone. Mark Wahlberg reportedly never played the video game, as he didn't want to become addicted and felt the script connected him to the story enough.
That's awesome. I think that's really great. That speaks a lot about the movie right there.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Agreed.
that you don't have to be connected to the source material to appreciate it.
Yep. The role of Jason Colvin was originally offered to Tobey Maguire, even though Chris O'Donnell ended up playing it.
Mm-hmm. I feel like the
Small
characters.
role
Yeah,
for Tobey
it's very
Maguire.
small role. Small role for anybody, really.
Yeah.
Find his character kind of useless.
Yeah.
I found it odd to see somebody that I knew playing that character.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of threw me off a little bit, and I guess I don't really like Chris O'Donnell very much. So
Oh. I wonder if it was a misdirect. Like, this character is going to be important. They just cast somebody to really
yeah,
just take care of it. Very little of the movie was actually shot on green screen. Instead, director John Moore opted to shoot in Toronto during the night in order to add extra reality to his actors' reactions.
I love the as practical as you can be with your effects and with the look of the film.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about that 100%.
Max keeps most of the stuff from his old house in a shipping container at a place called Gogniti's Self-Storage. The place is named after Mafia Lieutenant Vinny Gogniti, one of the video game's minor villains. There's a lot of references to the video game like that throughout, which is kind of nice. I like them. Another one, the Valkyr graffiti tag from the original Max Payne video game is visible just before Max takes a whipping in the alley by Mona Sachs.
Interesting.
I did see it up on the wall, and I did look for it. So I compiled the trivia before I rewatched the movie, so I know kind of what to look for. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, there it is.
I gotcha. Yeah, it's been a minute since I played the game, so it was. I wanted to play it before we did this, but I just didn't have time. It is kind of a long one.
It is.
So it was a little bit more difficult than I would have liked to kind of pick up on those similarities.
The trailers and promo items include material that was cut from the final film. This includes Max and Mona getting attacked at the tattoo parlor, and Mona stalking a person in a fur coat and lace. Director John Moore announced plans to release a director's cut of the film called the Gamer Dedicated Cut, but these plans have never materialized, apparently.
I loved that trailer.
Yeah, it's real good. God, there's a lot about this movie that's real good. Like, I forget how good it is. Like, I mean, it's good enough to where I bought it, and yet it's not something I'm like, oh, I need to watch Max Payne. Like, that doesn't always happen, but like, when I watch it, I'm so glad that I did. Due to the PG-13 rating that the studio wanted, John Moore filmed two versions of the two biggest action sequences in the film. A, the Acer SWAT building shootout, and B, Max Payne's attack on the Acer building starting from the parking garage scene. Moore filmed a version with impact squibs, which are seen in the PG-13 cut, and one with bloody wound squibs. Moore also stated that the unused parking garage scene using the blood wound squibs was, quote, one of the bloodiest shootouts he has ever filmed.
It's really disappointing that I didn't really feel like, because I've seen the unrated cut too, and it did really bother me that the movie had to be cut at all for a PG-13, because I don't really feel like it's super over the top. Even
it's not. It doesn't feel like it. Lastly here, the extra scene after the end credits was supposed to set the stage for a sequel, obviously. But due to the film's poor performance at the box office, 20th Century Fox decided to abandon those plans.
Wah, wah.
Wah, wah. So, let's talk about the movie itself.
Okay.
In all of its spoilerific glory. Like we were saying before, one of the things that jumps out to me during this movie so much, and one of the things that I love about Max Payne, the game itself, is the visual style of it, and it carries directly over. I mean, they're not doing blatant graphic novel panels like they did in the game, and I love those in the game, but it would have felt a little weird here. But they do kind of give you that feel with like the blacks and whites kind of muted colors, and then just splashes of red everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it looks, when you take a movie like that, where you can say that every frame, like if you took that and just pulled it out and looked at it by itself, like it looks like a painting. It's just absolutely incredible the way that they were able to just take just normal everyday scenes and scenarios, and that it's something you've seen before, but it also looks like something that you've never really seen before. And it absolutely did a great job of respecting the way that the game looked as well, and kind of translating that to film is just, it's incredible.
Yeah, I loved all the transitions where you like get a flash of red and then it fades out slowly and then you get like just left with the muted colors of the next scene. Every time there was snow falling, I was like, man, this is freaking gorgeous right now. It's just the lighting is so beautiful against like the falling snow and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. The way it's almost like I hesitate to say it's dreamlike because there is a dream sequence it's a dream sequence. It's more of a flashback, but it plays like a dream, especially in the video game. But that's almost what watching the whole thing feels like. Is it feels like you're just watching somebody's dream as opposed to reality.
Yeah. Like we said, there's a lot of stuff that carries over from the video game. They're very good about bringing over the kind of tone and attitude of it. Now, I also have not played in a while. Does Mona not show up until Max Payne 2 in the games? Or that's like when her bigger role is? Like maybe you get a little bit of Mona in the first one, but it's not a lot.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, she is present, but she's not very present.
Yeah.
She's almost doesn't feel like a main character. And I know that the second one, and it's been even longer since I played that one, but the second one is where she really shines.
Yeah, and that one gets wacky.
Yeah. And
real wacky.
She doesn't have that much presence in the movie though either. I mean, she kind of has to because it's much shorter, of course. But you don't really ever lose your focus on Max, even when Mona is there. So I think they did as much as they could, to kind of achieve a similar balance to the video game, while still giving you, another character that is important to the story and is as relevant as they need to be.
Yeah. How did you feel about the antagonists in the movie compared to the game? Because like the big antagonist in the game is probably what they would have used for the sequel because they set that up. And I forget her name, but like that businesswoman, that head of Acer, she has a very small role here, but
I just remember she's played by Meredith's mother in Grey's Anatomy.
Oh yeah,
that's who she is to me. She's Meredith's mom.
But we get like Bibi and Lupino are kind of like the two bigs in this one.
Well, it's gonna sound like a weird answer, but I honestly feel like it doesn't matter, because to me, what this movie is about and what the first Max Payne game was about was his own struggle with loss and how it just sort of breaks him as a person. Like, that's the story to me.
Yeah.
The story to me is not Acer Corporation. It's about how people deal with having unlimited power in this case, which would be Bibi. Because he has that whole monologue in the movie about how when he's basically going to kill Max, and he says something along the lines of, I didn't know that this was something that I could just do and this would take care of all my problems. I would have been doing it all my life. Like, that's just like a disgusting display of just like raw power.
It's such a weird monologue too. It's actually in my notes as like one of the things that I was like, that feels, I guess, I mean, it's supposed to feel inhuman, but like it also feels, I don't know, it didn't work necessarily because it felt like such a 180 from everything else we've seen from Bibi in the entire movie, as if they were like really just hiding the twist.
That's fair. Yeah.
We didn't get foreshadowing, really.
Right. You feel like that's an issue with his performance, or just with how it's written in the movie?
It could be a little both, because I don't know what he did versus the script. I did notice in like every scene that he leaves Bibi in, Bibi just hangs his head immediately. Like every time he's like, oh, Max, you're killing me.
Yeah, he's I don't know. Beau Bridges is kind of just like, I don't know. He's just very like hard to watch to me.
Yeah. A little bit was the performance. Yeah.
But yeah, like I find that, overall, you could have put any antagonist in the movie. It wouldn't have mattered. Because you still have that story about Max basically doing whatever he needs to do to sort of attempt to let go and move on from the death of his entire family.
Yeah.
And that's the bread and butter for me.
They did a really nice job of showing his not feeling invulnerable, because it wasn't that, his like not caring if he lived or died.
Yes.
I mean, he didn't have a death wish because he had a mission, but like he was very reckless all the time. And it was subtle things too. Like he would walk across the street and just walk in front of driving cars with zero hesitation, and they would slam on the brakes. So there were like little things like that throughout the movie that just kept reinforcing how reckless he was and how like focused on what he was doing he was. He just didn't care about anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's sort of, you pick up on that kind of in like the opening lines of dialogue a little bit, where he says, I don't believe in heaven, which represents everything that's good, and not even necessarily in a literal fashion, just represents something that you would care about enough to avoid death, I guess, to not be so reckless. He says, I don't believe in heaven, I believe in pain, I believe in fear, and I believe in death, as in like it's an inevitability. It's going to happen. So, why am I going to worry about why am I going to worry about preventing that? Mm-hmm. Which ultimately is something that, he feels like he needs to do to get revenge, or, however you want to put that. I don't think it's quite that simple, but
yeah, it's a little more complex.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wish they brought over from the game that they really didn't, because when I think of Max Payne, I think of bullet time and I think of the blood trails. Mm-hmm. Those are like the two iconic things from the game for me. So like they do that memory sequence of him walking through his old house. And I was praying that they would have some incorporation of the blood trail in there. And I understand it would have made the sequence a little bit longer, because those levels are infuriating in the game. They're both infuriatingly long. And they're throwing like platforming elements into a slow-mo shooter, which just don't need to be there. So it's an aggravating part, but it's one that's like burned into my memory as a result. And I kind of wish they had done something with it during that memory sequence.
Yeah, a lot of things like that, I do think just sort of all revolve around the same idea that if this movie does have a flaw, and I will sit here and I will shout as loud as I need to about how much I love this movie and how much hate it doesn't deserve. But man, the one thing that I will fully admit is, what is it, like 96 minutes, I think, for this movie, something like that. It's not enough.
Yeah, I agree.
It was not enough.
It's a little too short, and I don't think that much was cut out of the R-rated version to make it PG-13.
No, I believe it was like 3 minutes, I think, and just mostly violence.
Yeah, it's something very small, but yeah, I would have loved to see more exploration. Like you said, they were the important thing is Max and his loss, and not necessarily the mission and the antagonists. So I really kind of wish that they'd leaned into that.
Yeah,
which I think video game movies are afraid to do a lot. I think they focus on just being action oriented.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I'm not sure if it's an issue of how the general public, like the 18 to 35, I guess, I don't know if I'm getting that range right, but that audience, especially in 2008, how they perceived video games in general, which wouldn't have necessarily been an emotional experience. It's blood and guts and fun, and a couple hours wasted, and that's it. So I think what we got as far as telling that emotional story goes in this film was fantastic. But it does kind of make me wonder, if this movie was made like this year, would we have gotten the same movie? Or would we have gotten that stronger character study, that 2 hour and 20-minute movie instead? Right. That would have really helped them be able to kind of flesh it out and give it the attention that it ultimately deserves.
It's interesting that video game movies are often like action oriented and shorter, when a video game itself is this like long, generally like this, like the ones they make into movies are these longer explorations and have tons of character development, because they're not usually making movies out of things that are just pure action, but they're not also exploring the characters.
That's the thing. Like, that was one of critically, one of the biggest complaints about this movie was, they said it was sold as an action movie, but it's not an action movie, and I don't know. I look at, like, I watch that trailer every day because I used to work at a movie theater, and I would put that trailer in front of as many movies as possible just so I could watch it. Like, I see that trailer, and I didn't pick up on it to be like an action movie. It wasn't sold to me that way. I can kind of understand it because that's a lot of what the trailer is, but you still kind of have this idea in the back of your head when you watch it of like, oh, well, this isn't just about that. This is about the characters as well and their stories, and not just, bang, bang, shoot them up for an hour and a half. So it does kind of bother me that ultimately this is not an action film. It's a noir detective film. It's a character study. It's like a supernatural thriller. And I don't think it's fair for people to fault it because it doesn't have enough action when they say it was sold as an action movie when it wasn't.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And the tone feels right. Like it's like we were saying earlier too, like too much slow-mo bullet time would have ruined this movie for sure. Even the action sequences are done sparingly and they're all fairly meaningful. There's not a lot, and this is another kind of point in its favor, especially as a video game movie. There's not a lot of action thrown in there for the sake of action.
Yes. They didn't have time.
No, they didn't really. How did you feel about the role that Valkyrie played in this movie and kind of the way that they visually represented it?
I mean, I didn't necessarily have any complaints as far as that goes. You know, I thought that there was just as much as there needed to be. I can understand why people had issues with how it was presented because it could be a little bit confusing. I'm trying as best I can to speak, you know, at least for this question as far as somebody who hasn't played the game. Because if you've played the game, you know, you get it, you understand it, you see what they're trying to push at you right away.
Because they have time.
yeah. I mean, that's true. But as far as, you know, I think it was embellished a little bit too much, you know, as far as how the effects were portrayed in the movie. But ultimately, I think it was effective because it was quick. You know, you knew what was happening to somebody right away, and you could see how intense it was right away. Because again, they didn't really have time to sit there and focus on that for, you know, 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time. Like you've got to move on. So, you know, you get your big sprawling shadow angel bird, Viking, whatever the fuck,
Valkyries or whatever. Yeah.
And I mean, you know, it works, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's honestly one of the things that I really like about the movie, although I understand why people might be a little confused because I've watched it with people who are like, wait, why are there demons attacking them? Especially at the beginning. They're like, wait, what? Like, I thought this was just like a guy getting revenge. Why are there like demons? And yeah, of course it doesn't make sense at the beginning. But as you go through, I feel like the Valkyrie only show up when somebody is tripping out on Valkyrie.
Right.
I feel like they did that enough for people to make the connection. And yet there were still some people who were like, wait, he pulled him out the window? Why did he pull him out the window? Be like, no. Like he was super high on this drug and tripping and he like leapt out the window himself. He was like, no, but that thing pulled him out. Like, no, that's metaphor. That's representation. Like he's nuts. He jumped out the window. Don't take it literally.
Yeah, I do think though, and you know, this is probably the only other thing that I could say on it is that even though we as viewers are not supposed to take that literally, the way that the movie presents that's what these people are seeing.
It's true.
That's a little strange to me. You know, if you okay, I have this drug here and I'm going to take it and it's going to make you see this very specific thing.
Yeah.
A little bit odd. Like I'll give you that.
To the point where they're all getting the tattoos of the wings on them because that's what they see.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it doesn't bother me. It is strange, though.
It's also very strange that Acer would put a wing in their logo. Be like, this is the thing that all the junkies are tattooing on themselves. Good thing it's in our logo.
It's unfortunate.
I really love the visual representation of them too. Like all the having like the ashes form. And like you see the just cinders kind of burning in as they're appearing is visually amazing looking.
Oh, yeah.
I love too. And although like I never want the hero to have to resort to this in movies like this. But when Max does eventually have to take it to like keep his heart running, basically. And he's just screaming with like burning embers around him. I'm like, that's the visual that sums up how Max feels about this entire movie.
Yeah. I mean, that was perfect. You know, like he was breaking through that, you know, he did what he had to do and he still overcame what that thing did to him. And that was such a perfect like visual representation of that. You know, it did get a little bit silly, you know, when, you know, his wife shows up out of nowhere and it's just like, Max, you know, and it's just like, okay, well, sure, I guess you had to do that. Like, that's fine. But, you know, it's overall, like, I thought, like, the emotion in that scene was perfect. And, you know, I love when a movie is able to portray something like that without saying a word. I think that's incredible. And it probably couldn't have been done any better without reworking the entire movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's a movie rule right there. Show, don't tell.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they were doing, which was phenomenally done. Are there any other, like, big things that stood out to you or kind of bugged you about the movie?
It's really difficult because anything that I would say as far as that goes comes down to the length. The movie needed to be longer. Like, it just ends. It's like there's like, yes, there's resolution there, but like, man, I can't. Actually really interesting kind of having this thought process. Like, I don't think it's going to change my mind, but like, I never thought about this. Like, I cannot put myself in the shoes of a moviegoer saying, I want to go see a movie. This looks interesting, or I like Mark Wahlberg or whatever. Let's check it out. You know, like, it probably was pretty confusing. And you know, I you know, live in this bubble of like being a huge Max Payne fan, and suddenly you're ripping me out of it, and I'm uncomfortable. I don't like it.
So you think maybe they didn't prepare a completely new movie viewer enough for this story?
Yeah, I would say that's probably accurate. Yeah, there wasn't enough there, and I get that, and you know, I have to be able to be critical of that. I still think that, you know, it gets a little bit too much hate, but I can definitely say that just overall, just to, you know, sort of attempt to answer your question, that's really my biggest thing, is it wasn't enough. It was enough for me, but it's not enough for somebody who doesn't know Max Payne. Right.
I can see that. Yeah, I mean, they mention early on that his wife was killed. They mention nothing about the kid early on, and we don't see that until, like, I don't know, the beginning of Act 3.
Yeah.
When he goes to his house, his old house, and he sees the crib there, and it's still not that explicit. Like, we know, and I wonder if they avoided that topic because of the PG-13 cut. Like, we know the baby's dead. In that scene, though, there's not any real evidence that the kid was killed.
Yeah, you know, I know that, you know, it is mentioned in the beginning, so it's just kind of something that they expect you to remember. But yeah, there is, you know, that is another something that's important to mention is, you know, how much of a lack of substance does this movie have because they were forced to stick with the PG-13 rating. I do find it interesting as well that, and if I remember correctly, I was doing a little bit of reading a couple of days ago, and that was one of 3D Realm's chief complaints about the differences between the movie and the game, and sort of why they disowned it, was because in the game, you see that right at the beginning.
Yes.
But in the movie, you don't see it until like 45 minutes in or something. And I wonder, do you feel like that would have made a difference as far as somebody who doesn't know anything about Max Payne and just going to see the movie if they saw that first?
I think it would have immediately gotten people on Max's side and rooting for him. But I think you don't want people to necessarily root for Max right away. Like, he's supposed to come off as an asshole.
Yeah.
And then he becomes not completely relatable, but a little more endearing throughout the movie as we kind of figure out, like, oh, okay, this is the reason he is why he is. I don't think it should have come as late as it did, but I don't think it's necessarily the first thing we wanted to see.
Yeah.
Granted, it would have set the tone right away and been like, hey, let's get the big stuff tackled. Let's present this. This is the material we're dealing with. Now you have to deal with it for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, it's always really interesting to think about, like, even just that very basic shuffle. You know, take this scene, put it at the beginning, just to see sort of how much that could potentially change someone's perception of the movie as a whole. You know, again, like, I could sit here and say, oh, I was on Max's side, you know, from the start.
Sure.
But again, I cannot put myself in the shoes of somebody who just doesn't know that story.
Right.
So it tends to be pretty difficult to think about how actually that would be portrayed by somebody who doesn't know.
Yeah. My only other kind of gripe with the movie, and it's a very small one, that freeze frame of the mobile above the crib and the BB's face in there was garbage.
Yeah, that was unnecessary.
It was a junk shot. It was not necessary to have him like remember his face in there because there's no way. And it's just a really shitty still frame. Like they clearly did that in post.
It's a little awkward. It's a little awkward for sure.
It's real bad. But aside from that, a great movie.
Yay.
No, I really enjoy Max Payne. Like we did say, it definitely is my favorite video game adaptation in a world of many, many attempts at making solid video game movies. Yeah. Max Payne is by far the best of them.
I would agree 100%.
Any final thoughts on the movie before we wrap things up?
The only thing I would say is give it a second chance. You know, maybe anybody that's listening, if you've, sort of your ears perked a little bit and you said, oh, well, that kind of makes sense. And, or maybe I wasn't somebody who could appreciate this movie because I haven't played the game. Play the game. The game. It's a fantastic game. It'll take you, maybe a day or two, if you have a few hours each day to spend with it. Play the game and then watch the movie. And I really do feel like that would give somebody the ability to appreciate it a little bit more.
I have to say I'm tempted to play it again, just because it's been a long time and I do miss it. It's a tremendous story.
And you can watch that at twitch.tv/The Geek Generation.
Speaking of plugging things, is there anything we can plug for you?
Well, not necessarily anything specifically at the moment. I spend most of my time modding and community managing on Twitch. So I generally stay behind the scenes most of the time. I will be on another podcast soon, TM.
Which honestly, by the time this comes out, it will probably be out already.
Maybe
we're backlogging too before we release. So
That's fair. The podcast is called Deep Dive. I'll be doing that with Miss Pumpkinberry, so another broadcaster on Twitch. Where we sort of take the narrative of a video game and sort of pick it apart and figure out how it relates to our lives and just sort of dive into that as much as possible. So I'll be doing that. I do my own streams on Twitch every so often at twitch.tv/CaptHowdy, CaptHowdy. But beyond that, that's about it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking Max Payne with us.
Thank you. I was super excited. I'm super excited to do this, and I hope to do it again.
Oh, you shall, because we have many movies to talk about.
Yes.
Yes. Random Movie Club is a production of the Geek Generation. If you like this show, be sure to check out our podcasts and videos at thegeekgeneration.com, plus our live streams at twitch.tv/thegeekgeneration. Don't forget, you can support Random Movie Club by visiting our Patreon campaign at thegeekgeneration.com/support. As always, thanks to Michael McLeod of Wolfsten Music for our theme song. A link to his site can also be found on our site. Thanks for listening, and make sure you join us next time when we'll discuss Her. See you then.